Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Novak,
Here.
Member Dodson,
Here.
Member Erb, Member West Henderson, Member Maloney,
Here.
Member Schutte,
Here.
ex officio Member Rosenberg. A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. We're now on agenda item 3, which is our beginning public comment. If anyone has anything they'd like to discuss before we get going. No. Okay, then we're on agenda item 4, which is approval of our minutes of February 8th, 2023. Does anybody have any corrections or changes? Nope. I'll accept a motion for approval.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of February 8th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. In case these are new people to our secretary, that was Miss Maloney as the motion and Mr. Dodson as the second. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 5A, which is discussion only regarding an update on our CAMPO public participation plan. Miss Norman, can take us through this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly Norman, Transportation Planner. CAMPO's public participation plan was last updated in 2019. CAMPO staff, with the support of parametrics, are working on an update to the PPP. The public participation plan is a required function of a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive transportation planning organization. This presentation is to inform the board of the process CAMPO is following, not only to fulfill this requirement, but to define realistic engagement goals and guidelines to encourage early and continuous and meaningful public involvement in the transportation planning process. A summary of the process for the PPP update is outlined in these 7 steps. We reviewed the federal and state requirements, CAMPO's current practice and tools for public outreach. We met with local and regional partners and some of our peer agencies, some smaller MPOs. And we developed a public survey that will go live tomorrow, followed by the next steps that you can expect for the public participation plan. While researching, interviewing peer agencies, and preparing the PPP document, staff's overarching goals are to increase meaningful public involvement and define what that looks like for CAMPO. Develop innovative approaches while balancing CAMPO's time and resources. Focus on underserved communities and understand barriers that prevent public involvement, and continue to build and nurture the relationships and partnerships CAMPO has with its partner agencies. Staff and parametrics have reviewed federal requirements, which include a minimum 45-day comment period on an update to the PPP, and to provide this document to the FHWA and FTA and post it online. Define the engagement process for individuals and specific stakeholders listed here. Staff reviewed changes required by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Specifically, this emphasizes encouraging MPOs to use social media and web-based tools, also known as virtual public involvement. The U.S. Department of Transportation developed guidance on practices for meaningful public involvement in transportation decision-making, published in October 2022, which CAMPO is referencing often in this process. CAMPO must abide by the Nevada Public Open Meeting Law, requirements for public noticing, public comments, and accessibility, including both physical and virtual accommodations. Staff and parametrics have reviewed our current public participation plan, again, last updated in 2019. CAMPO's current PPP is compliant with past federal regulations and Nevada public open meeting law. CAMPO currently requires a 30-day public comment period for most documents. There's a 14-day public comment period for the TIP and a required 45-day comment period for the PPP. CAMPO currently utilizes Nevada Appeal ads, social media, surveys, the CAMPO website, and Carson Now. Parametrics and CAMPO guided the informational interviews with our local and regional partners. This includes Carson City, Lyon County, Douglas County, the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Nevada Department of Transportation. A simplified summary of the discussion guide is presented here. We focused on understanding the agency's resources for community involvement, identifying methods of how CAMPO can collaborate with partners on public outreach, evaluating what works and what doesn't, identifying opportunities for joint public outreach, and we listened to suggestions on how CAMPO can improve engagement with local residents. We were able to meet with several people in new public information roles and make connections for continued agency collaboration. CAMPO and Parametrics identified and interviewed similar size MPOs, including Bend MPO in Oregon, Dixie MPO in Utah, and Washoe County RTC and the Lake Havasu MPO in Arizona. We discussed existing staffing, organizational structure, and time spent practicing public outreach. We discussed how peer MPOs coordinate with their local governments and techniques and tools used for coordination and public outreach. We discussed how MPOs have adapted since COVID-19, their most successful public outreach efforts, and efforts to engage underserved communities and how they measure their success of their outreach programs. Staff want to sincerely thank the representatives of these organizations for taking the time to reflect on the public outreach process. CAMPO will launch a public survey beginning tomorrow, March 9th. Here is an example of what the survey will look like when you click on the link. We have 8 questions. There's a short intro describing what CAMPO is and how we are asking for how people would like to engage in the transportation planning process. And so the 8 questions consist of, do you feel that transportation planning is important to you? And how would you prefer to receive information or interact with CAMPO staff? What types of transportation planning are you most likely to participate in? And there's a list for people to choose from. And how likely are you to attend an in-person public meeting or an online public meeting on a rating 1 to 5? And then we also asked if there are barriers that prevent people from participating in the transportation planning process. And if so, what would those barriers be? And if they're not listed, there is a place for people to input what those barriers might be. We asked people to describe their age and where they live. We're really aiming to target Carson City, Douglas County, and Lyon County residents and want to understand who's responding. And so we decided to add that last question as well so we could understand who we are reaching with our public outreach. The public participation survey opens tomorrow, March 9th. CAMPO will advertise the launch of the PPP survey through a press release. CAMPO will draft the public participation plan document in May of 2023. And within this document, staff are looking to provide a menu of public engagement and outreach tools that Campo can choose from relative to Campo activities. Following the 45-day public comment period beginning in May and the compilation and incorporation of public comments from the survey, the final public participation plan will be presented to the board in July. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the parametrics team, including Amy Cummings, who I don't think made it tonight, and Jennifer Valentine, Jackie Kuchenmeister, Eric Nielsen, whose experience and educated guidance have significantly elevated this public participation plan effort. Thank you.
So I have a question in general that you're looking for public participation, and I noticed your 8th survey question dives into where they live, and you have other. I guess that's one of my overarching concerns is how you're capturing public comment that's relative to our actual residents within the Campo area, because I saw that, going to more social media. And I've noticed when you go to social media, you get comments from, well, everywhere, right? You might even get them from Australia and things. So I'm very interested in, will the other just be taken out and discounted because you really want to capture the public information from the people within the planning area? So I'm very interested on how you're going to weed out public comment to be that is germane to our area. Or you're still working on that?
We don't have a definite plan for that. I would like to add that people who live outside of the area and work here may have relevant transportation planning advice or comments, or people visiting may have relevant comments as well that we may consider in that context. And so I would consider where they are from, and perhaps we should consider how what is their interaction with the transportation infrastructure within Carson City.
I'm still very interested to not be, if their comment is, as you said, we were in Carson City last week and think your roads are too narrow or your snow wasn't removed, that's relevant. I just want to make sure how you're going to give context and relevancy to people commenting on a Facebook page. So I look forward to seeing how you're going to
As part of this process,
articulate those.
from the smaller MPOs, a lot of the most meaningful outreach is done in person. Through tabling at events, at public events. And a lot of the smaller MPOs have done their most meaningful engagement when they qualify it in person. The only MPO that has had real success that we talked with was the RTC Washoe, which is much bigger, has much more of an outreach and much more of a budget for that. But I hear you. We will take that under consideration and weigh the comments that.
So
that
on
we
this
receive.
survey, you don't have, do you work in any of the locations? So you're only looking to count residents? I mean, you put other, but why not the people that work here? Or work in Dayton, or just a question.
Well,
I think there's a variety of factors.
I'm just saying, now's the time to talk about it.
Sure. I mean, I think if we could certainly consider adding a question related to do you live or work here? I mean, modifying the question would be a relatively easy adjustment to the survey. I think for this initial survey, we're really looking for best practices in terms of how people want to communicate with us. And so we have the factors that talk about where they live and where they work. You know, going forward, I think there are other components that we definitely can consider, and I appreciate the comments brought up about how do we factor in comments received through other sources from a variety of factors. I'm not sure that that's necessarily one of the priorities of this initial survey, but I think it is important going forward for project implementation.
Well, do you anticipate like sending this survey to the chamber and asking them to send it out to all their members? Because to me, you're gonna get, as we well know, 25 to 30%, they don't live here, so,
Right.
but yet they have an impact. So it's just a
Yep.
thought that you could have one more question. It'd be interesting to see, I live in Carson City and I work in Carson City, or I live in Carson City, but I work in Douglas. I don't know. I just think,
I think that's an
why
easy
miss
change.
the opportunity to add the ninth question?
Easy
and
change.
ask where they work. It's just I'm interested in who's really responding to the survey and what, like you said, what are we reaching? So it's just a thought. Any, yes, Ms. Schutte?
Yeah, I actually like your comments in terms of what other means. So it's a meaningful question in and of itself. And then also, though, how you, and then how to, it gives a tool for application, because there could be some wonderful ideas coming from someone in another category, but to then be able to link it to the relevancy of this area. So I think that's a good observation. First of all, I love this. I love the outreach. Public participation is really important, and when people feel heard, folks tend to be more on board because they're more engaged in the whys behind a project. One thing that comes to mind right at the beginning, we want to hear from you, and then the fundamental and essential parts of planning is engaging and listening. But I think it'd be really helpful, and if not in this survey, although if it's not too late, I think it'd be important to have it, is really a quick overview of why public participation helps the process and how it helps the process, so that there's kind of some, it kind of then directs the conversation. How is this participation going to help us? How in the past, the relevancy of concerns about road width or of planning, do you feel heard? The barriers, I love that that's being included, barriers to involvement. Because how might things be different if barriers were considered, or now that we're acknowledging that not everyone is able to participate because of A, B, or C, we want to make that better. So I just think a little bit more introduction might be helpful, because that in and of itself could be a barrier, that people don't understand really what it is they're answering. What do I have to add? I know nothing about planning. I know nothing about roads. I'm not an engineer. I just want to go to work every day. So I think a little invitation and a why or a what would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Maloney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I reread the PPP in preparation for this item, just to see if there were any items that I could think of that should be considered as part of this process in the PPP. And one thing that stood out to me the other night when I read through it had to do with, you talk about meaningful public involvement. And specifically, I noticed that there's no commitment to meaningful public involvement as it relates to regionally significant projects that are identified in our planning documents. And I haven't done a lot of research on this in general. And as an MPO, our responsibilities are really that coordinating umbrella across the different implementing agencies. However, there may be an opportunity for some sort of commitment, even if it's just sort of an aspirational goal, to ensure that meaningful public involvement is happening during the design phases of those regionally significant projects. So if a project makes it into our TIP, like those projects we discussed last month, is at some point there a project appropriate and implementing agency appropriate opportunity for public involvement? And if the implementing agency isn't able to provide it, or it's not really appropriate for them, perhaps CAMPO can serve at as that venue. So I'm not really sure what it would look like, but it may be that our consultant has some ideas or has done something like this before, and that might be an opportunity to make our PPP more robust.
I appreciate that. I think CAMPO has succeeded in receiving project comments and not received so many planning comments from plans or on plans or being read by the public. And I think that enhancing CAMPO's story and outreach from planning to project, including design, could enhance that, and we'll dig into that.
And supporting the partners in that vein as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Is anybody else? Mr. Novak?
Yep, 2 quick comments. Not everybody speaks English, so I hope you have that covered.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, we will be translating the public survey into Spanish as well, and doing outreach to our Spanish-speaking community.
And then a general question, does CAMPO have a public information officer? I know when you start asking for input, who gets to sift through all this stuff? Because it could be a big job, at some point. Do we know how that works today, or what are we looking at in the future?
CAMPO staff will be
looking at her.
sifting
Yeah.
through this information and considering all comments.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, it's not an action item, so we will move on. Thank you so much, Kelly. Excuse me. We're now on to agenda item 5B, which is discussion and possible action regarding the submission of the 2023 Transportation Alternatives Program, our TAP grant app, to DOT for $180,000 with a 5% match of $9,000 to complete phase 2 of the US 50 East Carson Complete Street Corridor project. Kelly, you've got that one too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly Norman, Transportation Planner. CAMPO is planning a 2-phased complete streets corridor study from I-580 to Mound House in Lyon County. Phase 1 will focus on safety, mobility, and traffic operations. CAMPO is currently working on a cooperative agreement with NDOT for Phase 1. Staff anticipate this agreement for Phase 1 will be presented to the board next month. Phase 2 will include pedestrian, bicyclist, cultural, historic, landscape aesthetic, freight, and environmental considerations. On February 14th, 2023, NDOT announced the opening of the 2023 Transportation Alternatives Program funding cycle. CAMPO's applying for a TAP planning grant to fund the second phase of the US 50 East Carson Complete Streets Corridor study. The project's main goals are to review and update past corridor information, gather public outreach, conduct data collection, assess corridor operations, consider planning and environmental linkages, and assess future transit opportunities. The project will result in the development of specific conceptual roadway enhancements, cost estimates for design and construction, and possible implementation schedules for NDOT to consider. CAMPO will lead the planning effort in partnership with NDOT. Staff is seeking approval to submit a TAP grant application for the project in the total amount of $180,000. This project will require a 5% local match. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions on this? So just to be, when I look at your exhibit 1 on the project, the total cost is 330,000. Because we're using, so the phased 1 was the 150 and we used a different funding source. So I just want to make sure everyone's on the page, and any public that's listening, it's the overall project's 330,000 to complete.
Correct.
Right. I just want that on the record that we're not hiding anything. It's all out there. So no questions?
And if phase 2 is not approved, we still have phase 1. We
Correct.
need our approval today. So.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not dependent on each other. Okay, is there any public comment? And then just in general, the 5% match is $9,000. Is that what I was reading? Is the match, and that is coming, that match is coming out of Carson City's RTC? Is that what that says?
The local match is coming out of the Carson City Complete Streets Fund, as well as a portion of the Lyon County. The portion outside of Carson City would be matched with Lyon County local dollars through the UPWP program.
And their part is only 720?
Yes, based on the length of the road.
It's going from where to where?
I-580 to Highland Drive and Mound House.
Oh, to Highland and Mound House, okay. So the match is a little bit more, $9,720. 9,000 from us and 720 from Lyon County?
It's the
Or we'll
total, the
reduce
total
ours.
match is 9,000. The portion of that match will be paid, $720 of that match will be paid by Lyon County. The remaining portion would be paid by Carson City Complete Streets funding.
Okay, so we're a little less than the 9,000.
Correct.
Plus 720. Okay,
Yes.
that's not what it says.
Chris, our Complete Streets account, that comes from the voluntary contributions from registrations?
Correct. The Complete Streets account, it comes from the $2 voluntary donation
Good.
at driver registration.
Have you heard of any idea to increase that voluntary ceiling?
I
through this
have not.
legislature?
I have
From
not.
2
That
to
doesn't
5?
mean there isn't. I just
Okay.
haven't.
All righty, I think it's good use of the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, nobody else had any questions? Then I'll accept a motion, Mr. Dotson.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, yes, sorry, thought you were making the motion.
Just wondering, on this phase 2 portion, if it doesn't get approved, you're gonna continue with the phase 1 elements. Does that mean that the corridor study itself will be limited to the elements that are in phase 1? Or would the phase 2 portion have to be done at a later date?
We would, if in the event that we weren't awarded the Transportation Alternatives Grant, we would look to do as much as we could with the available funding in phase 1, we'd stretch it as far as we could. So if that means we could get in some additional multimodal components as part of that analysis, we will definitely attempt to do that. But I'm relatively optimistic, and my fingers are crossed that we'll be successful in this grant application.
When is the phase 1 grant coming?
We're working on the agreement with NDOT. We anticipate it next month.
Next month.
Yeah.
And when will we know if we're getting a phase 2?
I don't know if NDOT has set a schedule for when they plan to release the awards, but I know that they want to get these done before the end of the federal fiscal year. So probably sometime before September.
I believe they're announcing the project rankings June 2023
there we go.
according to their schedule, but
Kelly, thank you for correcting me.
June 2023? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion? I do. Okay, Ms. Schulte.
I move to approve the submission of the grant application as presented.
I will second.
Okay, so that's Member Shudi and Novak for the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. I am actually really happy to see a project that crosses two of our member
Absolutely.
jurisdictions, so that's really good. Great job on that, you guys. Okay, so we're now on to agenda item 6A. Any transportation manager report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich. Greg, Commissioner Novak mentioned some legislative items. We are tracking a few miscellaneous bills through the Nevada legislature. Nothing in particular that I really want to bring up. The one today that came up was Assembly Bill 184, which is in regards to appropriating carbon reduction funding authorized under the infrastructure bill to specific purchases of vehicles. We're coordinating with NDOT on what that means and coordinating with federal highways on what's possible and not possible. I'm in contact with the city's legislative liaison to coordinate talking points and messaging and things like that. So that's one that could affect CAMPO that's kind of come up. I think there was a hearing, I think it may have been today at 4 o'clock. So there was some information coming on that one as well. But as other ones come up, if there's any that anyone is interested in or looking for, I'm happy to coordinate with the city's legislative liaison and the city manager's office on providing information to members as needed. So, other items, Kelly mentioned the US 50 Phase 1 study. So that one's, we're working through the agreement with NDOT on that, anticipating next month. I did want to bring up a couple of items related to federal grant opportunities. So CAMPO staff have been taking a look at, we've been really taking a look at a variety of grant opportunities that are created or ongoing through the federal infrastructure bill, whether that's existing ones, apportioned ones that we get every year, or competitive ones that we have to compete for with all the other MPOs or other cities and counties across the nation. What we've essentially done is we've taken all of our projects in our regional transportation plan and we've outlined them with a status of project readiness, potential funding sources, costs, schedule implications, and we've tried to assess how can we be competitive, how can we strategize the potential use of all these different federal funds for different projects. Some projects aren't eligible for certain buckets of money. Other projects are eligible for different buckets of money. And so we're trying to be strategic and look long-term at all of our projects in our RTP across all of our agencies to identify when and where it's appropriate to look for potential federal funding opportunities. I mean, I think as this board knows, and Carson City and other partner agencies have been relatively successful in getting large federal grants for our transportation projects. And it sort of starts with that planning and strategic thinking going forward as to how we can best leverage those federal funds and bring them back here to Carson City. So we have this matrix, and I have this matrix here with all of our RTP projects, all of the federal funding sources across the top, and trying to strategize how best we can approach being competitive and
That's
strategize
awesome.
when the
Yeah.
project meets for the grant opportunities. So if ever the board was curious in learning more about that, I'm happy to bring up additional details. I just wanted the board to know that in the background, there's a lot of coordination going on with not only our partner agencies, but with NDOT and strategizing how to use and understanding these federal pots of money, if you will. So just wanted to provide that as background to the board. But that concludes my report. Thank you.
Does any member have anything to share? You're quiet this time? Oh, I shouldn't have said a word, you guys. Okay.
According to the news, the president will be in Las Vegas next week. I don't know if it has anything to do with CAMPO or, National Monument or something, but you never know.
And he won't
what
be
might
snowed
happen.
in.
Yep.
If he was coming here, it'd be a dangerous trip.
Yeah.
It's like you never know.
I did look at the MPO presentations at the assembly, both Washoe and Clark, and their main presentation and questions were about transit funding. So I don't think CAMPO needs to make any presentations, but it looks like that level of discussion will be going on through June, I guess. So we'll see. That's all I got.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, then we'll move on to our final public comment. Nope. Okay, with that, we are adjourned as CAMPO. Thank you for a good meeting, and in 5 minutes, we will become RTC. We'll switch hats. You're ready. Mr. Dotson, are you ready? I whack him. Good afternoon. I'm going to call the Regional Transportation Commission to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Schutte,
Here.
Commissioner Dotson,
Here.
Commissioner Manaloni,
Here.
Commissioner Novak. A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item number 3, which is our initial public comment. This is getting scary. You guys are all in public comment? I didn't think so. But just in case there's someone in the public that wants to come up. No one? Okay. You scared me for a second there. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is approval of our minutes of February 8th. Does anyone have any corrections? Nothing? I'll accept a motion for approval.
I move to approve the minutes from February 8th.
I will second.
There's a second by Mr. Novak. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous, please. We're now on to agenda item 5A, which is discussion only, a presentation regarding our 60% design team for our East Williams Street Complete Streets project. Who's gonna start?
Yeah,
Okay.
just kind of introduce the team. We got our project manager, Darren Anderson, on the city, our city engineer, Randy Rice, and our consultant team, Angie Hefsley and Sean Teeter, to go over the presentation tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
All right, well, thank you. We're back here again, I think for meeting number 17 or something along those lines. Randy
like
Rice,
it.
city engineer for the record. We're going to be walking you through basically the progress we have thus far on the William Street project. We are at the 60% milestone. We're continuing to work towards 90%, but this is a great opportunity if anyone has any feedback from this commission. If you have any concerns, interests about certain areas, now would be a great time to intervene and kind of talk about those, and we can make adjustments in the project. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick reminder, a brief project overview. The corridor is from Carson Street to roughly I-580 or Russell Way, just to the west of the interstate. We're trying to transform the corridor into a complete street, right? So providing access or multimodal access for bikers, pedestrians, people that use public transportation, and also vehicles as well. So what have we been up to? Right now, we're working on moving past the 60% design. We just got done last month with a public meeting at February 7th. We've been working and coordinating closely with NDOT and FHWA on some of the grant requirements. We've been working on the draft NEPA documents, environmental, historic resources, things of that nature. We've also been working with our consultant to identify right-of-way needs, whether we need temporary and permanent easements to facilitate the construction and design of the project. We've also been working with business owners and property owners throughout the corridor to make sure that we understand their needs. There's a number of points of ingress and egress into the corridor, and of course, their business relies on traffic. And so we're trying to accommodate those to the extent practical, but making sure that the project fits within the complete streets policy. So today we're going to talk about the advancement of the 60% design. We'll talk about some of the things we've learned in the public meeting, some of the things that were discussed. We'll also talk about some options on the pedestrian crossing and give you what staff's recommended crossing location might look like. And then also just a brief update on where we stand on the project timeline. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angie, who's going to talk about project specifics throughout the corridor.
Thanks, Randy. Good evening. Angie Hefley with NCE for the record. I'm going to talk you through the 60% design concept from North Carson Street east through the corridor to I-580. What you're going to see is first you're going to see the existing conditions, and then you will see the proposed conditions overlaid on top of that. What I do want to mention that you're not going to see is we're doing a number of improvements underground. So this presentation is going to show you the surface improvements, but throughout the corridor, we are doing water line improvements, we're doing sewer improvements, we're doing storm drain improvements. We're also undergrounding the overhead utilities, as well as putting in conduit for future ITS for intelligent transportation systems. So those are the items that you're not going to see here. So starting at North Carson Street over to North Stewart Street, we are removing one eastbound lane. On the north side of the road and the south side of the road, we're putting pedestrian improvements and improved pedestrian lighting. We are also including bike lanes, both east and westbound. We have a traffic median at North Plaza Street, as well as landscape areas on the south side of the road. As you will see next to the landscape area, there's a brownish area. We do not have those called out. Those are our low impact development areas where we will be infiltrating storm drain. It will have a infiltration layer with gravel and then vegetation that's appropriate to the infiltration basins. So those are the other areas next to the landscape areas right there. Next. Throughout the corridor, we will also have signal modifications, and those are represented by the signals that you will see shown on each intersection. The modifications are going to occur at every signalized intersection throughout the corridor. Between Stewart and Roop Street, we are adding a dedicated right turn lane from North Stewart eastbound onto William Street. We will continue to have our bike lanes both east and west bound. We are adding pedestrian improvements and improved street lighting throughout this section, as well as adding a median at North Walsh Street. Next. There was also a bus stop there that I forgot to mention. Next is Roop to Mills Park. In this area, we have enough room that we can now transition from bike lanes to buffered bike lanes. So we're able to provide a 3-foot buffer between the bikes and the cars. We will have pedestrian improvements on the north side of the street and the south side of the street. Along Mills Park, we're going to be improving the multi-use path and the street lighting, landscaping, and also adding additional parking to Mills Park with the electric vehicle charging stations. There will be a bus stop added also in front of the community center there, and you will see that we have some medians placed, and we'll also be able to install narrower lanes through this area, which will help traffic calming. This is in front of Mills Park as we're going east. So we're going to continue the buffered bike lanes. On the north side of the road, we're going to be able to put a new sidewalk as well as a landscape area. We also, around the park, we will be putting the crosswalk with the pedestrian activated flashers. As Randy mentioned, we have additional slides later on in the presentation that discuss the location of the crosswalk. We will be continuing the buffered bike lanes. We will be widening the median that is currently in front of Mills Park that has the landscaping. We'll be enhancing that landscaping, improving the street lighting, narrowing the lanes through this area, and providing additional parking on the east end of the park. Next. Continuing east, Mills Park to Salomon, continue to have the buffered bike lanes. You'll see on the north side of the street that our improvements get less and less. That's because it's pretty well established right there with sidewalks. We have some spots that we need to do some connectivity improvements as well as some ADA improvements, but it's pretty minimal on the north side of the road there. The bus stops will be located based on the crosswalk location. So the bus stops that we're showing here are subject to change. They will be moved to the appropriate spot when we finalize the crosswalk location. We have additional landscape areas on the south side of the road as well as improved multi-use path. And we will be removing one left turn lane eastbound to northbound at Salomon. Salomon to east of Rand. We will, on the north side of the road, you will see that we have pedestrian improvements, and you will see that we have curb realignment in that area. This is a section of the road that's very, very wide, and we have the ability to shift some of that curb south to help narrow, calm down the traffic, but also provide improved landscaping area. And you can see that the pedestrian access at that point will be very well separated from the road in that area. We will be increasing the left turn storage as you're going westbound and turning south onto Salomon. Landscape areas on the south side of the road will be enhanced. We will be also installing a median at Rand Avenue, as well as buffered bike lanes throughout and another bus stop. So a lot going on this section. Continuing east, Humboldt to Gold Dust West. On the north side of the road, we have more improved landscape areas and pedestrian improvements. Continuing the buffered bike lanes. We are actually removing the median that's in front of El Pollo Loco there. And and extending the median that is just east of that, east of Humboldt Lane. We will be adding a dedicated right turn lane going eastbound, southbound onto Gold Dust Westway as well. And there's also additional bus stop improvements in this location as well. And last but not least, Gold Dust West to I-580 as we approach the NDOT right-of-way. We'll be adding a bus stop near Gold Dust West, as well as extending the buffered bike lanes. And then there's some bike lane striping that we need to do in the NDOT right-of-way to connect to the existing bike lane that is there now. And with that, I will turn it over to Darren.
Thanks, Angie. So we had a public meeting last month on the 7th, as Randy mentioned. I feel like it was pretty well attended. They had it over at the Ormsby room at the sheriff's office, and it was a pretty full room by the time we got started there. So feel pretty good about it. There was a lot of comments that were received and questions that the team took through the meeting. And this list here kind of highlights the subjects that came up with the lane widths, the speed limits, bike versus vehicle accommodations, and even pedestrian accommodations, accessibility, roundabouts versus the pedestrian bridge. A few of those have come up throughout the duration of design, medians versus no medians, and access to businesses, as well as the charging stations. So we've actually been making tweaks to the design since that, from that meeting. So it's been really good for us to help consider the things that came up from that. One of the items that's been up for discussion since the very beginning has been the pedestrian crossing near Mills Park. It was something that came up with the initial public outreach as a concern from the public as far as people crossing to the park and from the park, as well as something that the internal team's been aware of and others. And so up to this stage, we've shown it at State Street, and after the 30% presentation, we looked at it again to come up with some other options for other locations that may be better than State Street. And so that's what we're showing here is the 3 locations that we came to, and we would like to get the input from the committee for direction on which one is we'd like that we should pursue. The staff's recommending number 2, and like to step through these locations and see what kind of input the committee has. Crosswalk 1 is really how we see it as kind of the future, best location possibly for the future, just because of the blank lots that are to the north and the ability to connect the residential developments and properties to the north. One of the challenges that comes with option number 1 is the grading issues. So from the road through the parking lot to the south, there's quite a bit of grade change. And so there's going to be costs with concrete and potential railing, as well as the crossing put you into the parking lot. So it's not the ideal location with those considerations. Number 2 and number 3 are both, the grading is relatively flat. Option number 2 is kind of a medium between number 1 and number 3, as far as it'll accommodate the future development of those lots, as well as the current development and businesses to the east. Option 3 has the benefit of being most direct to the businesses that are currently there, as far as Starbucks, the car wash, and those. A few other reasons that we like number 2 is that it's kind of central between the signals of Roop Street and Solomon Road. So for vehicles that are coming through the corridor, if they're stopping at the signal at Solomon heading west, then they have a little further if they need to stop at the pedestrian crossing as well, so that they're not just getting going and then stopping fairly shortly afterwards. And then option number 1 is also provides kind of that good separation between the signals as well.
I don't understand what you're talking about in terms of the grading issue on option 1.
Yeah, so on the south side of the road, where there's the landscape median between the parking lot and the road, there's some difference in height from the road down into the parking lot. And so for accessibility accommodations, you have to deal with the ramps and the slope. And so it costs as far as retaining walls and all that.
All right, thank you.
And I guess I'll mention too, if the commission is happy to go with option 2, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this item. So if we're comfortable with option 2, that's our recommendation. We're happy to move on as well.
So let me start just in general, because I'll just admit that I go there every day. Where on this do we already experience jaywalking? Where are people actually crossing the road?
I'll just speak from my own experience. I don't know if there's anybody else up here or, Chris, if your transportation group has any thoughts. But I see it all over. Generally, it's, a lot of it's at the skate park. A lot of it's kind of random if they're coming from the development to the north. Sometimes they're trying to get to the community center. Often people, from the state side are trying to get to Walgreens or, access the skate park. So it really kind of comes from all over, but it's generally sprinkled across from what I've seen, in my time here in that general vicinity.
Because what I'm most interested in is I don't want to put a crosswalk in and no one uses it. That then we wasted our money. We didn't accomplish anything. So maybe that's my first discussion point. Is putting any of these in actually going to give us a gain? I ask that in all honesty, right? Because where our current development is, they can easily do Solomon itself and get to your Starbucks, get to your Walgreens, get back to the high school on time to go to school, all those good things. So is this something that could be done later? I mean, when you see what development, I don't know. I just don't want to waste money where we're trying to accomplish something and I'm going to continue to see nothing but jaywalking.
Sure. I'll take a stab at trying to answer that to some degree. I will say one, the relative cost of this crosswalk is very minor. The pedestrian ramps and the striping, pretty minor in the order of magnitude of probably like $10,000 to $15,000. So project cost wise, probably not the greatest expense. Secondly, I think one of the things I would like this commission to consider is when you're talking about able-bodied people, you're probably right. It's hard to get somebody that's, got all the legs in the world. They can cross wherever they want, right? They can move quickly, and that's great. But there are people that have challenges getting around with mobility issues, people in wheelchairs, people in walkers, maybe older generation of folks that don't have as easy of access, right? And so, my belief is, yes, we will get some improvement here, especially for that demographic, folks that don't have quite the mobility to get across there. I think they will appreciate having a dedicated spot that's intended to highlight the fact that they're crossing. Again, we're going to look at putting some rapid flashing beacons here. I'm sorry, I forgot to include that in the cost. Those are probably another $10,000 to $15,000 for those flashing beacons. And so I think that's the challenge here is oftentimes we put our own perspective into how we would operate. But one of the challenges we have as staff is try to accommodate everybody amongst the individuals we think we'll see in this corridor. And that is one group of individual I think will really appreciate having a dedicated crossing location.
And where are they crossing now?
Well, to your point, they're probably going up, to either to Solomon or to Roop to find those crossings. And again, if you're coming from the north and you're in a wheelchair, right, that obviously extends your distance to get to your intended destination potentially. So this just provides one more location where they can access the park easier. So again, thinking if you're coming from the north, for example, trying to access Mills Park, maybe you want to go enjoy the park, for example. At this point in time, your safest bet is to go all the way down to the light, cross the street, and then come back over. So whereas somebody able-bodied would probably just jaywalk or take their chances.
Is crosswalk 1 halfway between the two lights? Maybe I asked that again, I'm just trying to be rational about our decision. So if I'm trying to accommodate what you're indicating, is crosswalk 1 halfway between Solomon and Roop? So does that give them a third like you said, their third cross point versus 2 or 3.
Yeah, so the halfway point is pretty close to exactly in the middle of 1 and 2.
Oh. 1.5. Well, but you see, I'm trying to have logic. If I'm trying to accommodate people with mobility issues, then what is the best answer for them? Because I think the other people will continue to jaywalk. And so if I want to reach a specific group to provide assistance, then we're saying crosswalk 3 is out because it's already close enough to Solomon that they can that can be accommodated. So we're left with 1 or 2.
Yeah, so just to highlight a couple of things
Okay.
that Darren mentioned. So one of the issues we had with state as we started to go back through this options process is the proximity to the light, right?
Yeah.
So if we have pedestrians crossing at state, they activate the flashing beacon. Now all of a sudden we have a green
Traffic's
turn light, or
bad.
we have westbound traffic moving in here. Now they're backing up. And especially during peak hour demand, you're going to be looking at maybe like a lunch rush hour when they're trying to get through these businesses and have lunch. You could see stacking through there or queuing through the light where people are actually stopping at a green light, for example, trying to get through. And so in order to provide more storage space for those vehicles, our goal was to look at, well, can we push this further west to try to improve that scenario? And then back to your point, Chair Bagwell, option 1 and 2, that the exact midpoint is somewhere in there. And the reason we're kind of landing on and recommending option 2 is because it puts you outside of the parking lot. There's additional costs associated with option 1. It's kind of hard to see with this figure, but you'll notice there's actually a gray sidewalk that goes east-west on the south side of that crossing. That's a long ramp to help descend in grade to get from the higher elevation of the road into the lower elevation of the parking lot. And so again, it's not ideal. And then you're also pushing folks into the parking lot, which when you have vehicles parked there might be sight issues or line of sight, seeing those people coming in. So that's why staff is recommending option 2 because of those issues. And again, it is kind of a combined approach to look at all the pros and cons of each one. Is anyone absolutely perfect? Not really, but we feel that option 2 is a pretty good blend or balance between those features.
Okay. And then I saw in your public discussion, with all the snow and everything that we have been experiencing, are we sure we want to put all these medians in here? I think the road staff has been doing a tremendous job, but are we doing the right thing putting all these medians in?
Yeah, so that's something that's still on the table. Actually, what has happened since the last time we looked at this is I believe we've added a few more stalls, as you can see where the EV chargers are being proposed. And right now, we're actually limiting access from the westbound approach to go southbound and turned into the park. And I think that was not intended. I believe my thinking is we're probably going to move forward with removing those medians in this location, with the exception of the pedestrian refuge for the crossing. And so I think you'll likely see some adjustments recommended between now and 90%.
Good. Okay, those are my initial thought processes. Ms. Maloney, you were first.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to recall that when I was with the city, we paid Headway Transportation to study the pedestrian crossings, and I seem to recall that the most significant jaywalking driver was users of Mills Park in the skate park, sort of as staff mentioned, going up to that Starbucks area. And so in addition to that, I seem to recall that there was a lot of jaywalking during the special events at Mills Park. When folks are maybe parked further north and they start sort of drifting east and try to cross. And so for those 2 reasons, I'm very supportive of the second location with the removal of the excess medians there. I think they're an unnecessary capital cost and an unfunded maintenance liability. I'll also add, maybe it's a question. I have voices to Chris and to Randy offline that I'm not supportive of the median in front of State Street and the blocking of the left turn out. Similar to what we did on South Carson, if people want to wait, they can wait. And if not, they'll turn right and figure out where they need to go. It's just my opinion. I'm wondering, has any analysis been done on whether the crosswalk at option 2 or even 3 would create gaps in traffic that would allow the ability to turn left out of the State Street location? Or perhaps the volumes of pedestrians aren't high enough and it hasn't been looked at.
I'm sorry, it's been about 12 to 18 months since I've actually flipped through the report. I'll lean on staff if they have specific memory of that study, but potentially, yes, there could be, if we had pedestrians crossings, that could be. The challenge for me there is we're kind of relying on a what-if scenario, and to me, that's not the way I'd like to design these complete streets projects. And so, granted, I know we've talked about this before, especially down at the 30% level. We kind of gone back and forth. We've looked at and we discussed glue down curbs or medians. So could we potentially design and install this project without that left turn prohibition? Now, the answer is I believe, yes, we could. We could accommodate or account for a future installation of those medians. And so if that is kind of the wish of this commission, I think we can certainly incorporate that into our design. However, I did want to reiterate that this is one of the areas that my recollection that we had a level of service F failing at this intersection, and it definitely recommended this was one of the key areas to restrict those left turn movements.
Can I ask just one more follow-up? In some more urban areas, they've implemented like time restricted signage instead of medians where maybe you can't turn left during peak hours and they define those in a sign. Was that something that was looked at?
I can't say specifically we've looked at that, but we're certainly open to evaluating that, for the next milestone.
I think there's just been, my understanding is there's been public comment related to the specific left turn out. And so I'm just trying to check all the boxes to say, yes, we looked at all these other alternatives before the median. And if that's the case, that's great.
Yeah, no, I won't sit here and say that, yes, we've done that, but certainly we can look at a multitude of options. So if there's any specific wish list here with this commission, if you'd like us to look at the glue down curb as being the preferred option, we can work with our design team to kind of anticipate that. Again, we looked at the 2030 and the 2050 scenario for the traffic and the levels of service. My recollection was that the failure mode was nearly immediately in the first model that was run in the 2030 stage. But if we would like to buy 5 to 10 years between now and prohibiting those left-hand turns, I think that that's certainly feasible. It's the difficulty is we have the money now, we have the grant money now. In the future, if this is a $50,000 improvement, is this going to be a high priority for the city? I think, maybe we can rely upon complaints or accidents. I hate to say that, safety is not something we want to utilize or downplay in order to get something built, but that might be the scenario we're looking at if we delay the installation between now and that 2030 scenario.
Well, I think the overall discussion is, again, people are going to ignore it and they're going to go anyway. I told you I'm there all the time. So do I make a right-hand turn if I'm there between 7:30 and 8:15? I make that normal choice all by myself because it's faster, right? I'm not going to take my life in my hands trying to cross that and then you do it again. But the entire rest of the day, it is wide open. And there is no reason to make me travel an additional mile to get right back where I started. So I think we have to honestly look at this, and I don't think I recall that we had any huge accident volume there. The accident volume is at Solomon where we even have a light, right?
Yeah,
Unless
so
I missed.
my
It's been a while.
recollection in this particular intersection
a
was
while.
that the volume was not great, but the severity was extreme. So this is one of the only fatality we'd had in the corridor. And so that was why staff was very supportive of this restriction, because we totally understand where you're coming from. Not all scenarios warrant, such extreme measures. But when we're looking at fatalities, we're looking at safety of the community. I think that's one thing to discourage people from making unsafe turns, whether it's during times where traffic is low or whether during times traffic are extreme. You're going to get a wide variety of decision-making from the public, right? And so by encouraging people to not have the option to make that bad decision will hopefully have better outcomes for safety into our community.
I think they'll do it anyway, and then we're going to hear about it. I want both. I guess I'm kind of greedy, right? I just want both. Mr. Novak, do you have?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in. I do agree with staff's recommendation for crosswalk 2, but I'm also in favor of keeping raise medians. They do slow traffic down, and they would give what you're calling jaywalkers a place to go, a refuge island, rather just in the middle of the two-way left turn lane. So I know you got some fine tuning here, but similar to some other folks, I just as soon restrict the left turns coming out of the coffee shop area.
Okay. The one thing I will mention, when we're talking about medians that don't have a crosswalk tied to them,
Right.
and trying to assume that they're going to be pedestrian refuges, we're kind of encouraging people to take that risk as a jaywalker. Just my preference for this corridor, if we're going to provide a distinct and noticeable crosswalk for people with the flashing beacons, I would prefer them to go to that location rather than doing their best to utilize those islands, because that can get them in a bad situation as well.
Ms. Schutte?
Thank you. I support crosswalk option 2, and I think it's really important that we have a crosswalk. And while I agree that not everyone will use it and that there will still be jaywalkers, I think it's an easier and better argument to make if there are citations
Yeah.
that
maybe
we
that-
have a
yes.
crosswalk, and so that we want to keep people safe. So I think it's important.
Mhm.
And I think as time goes by, something that's important to remember is, we can work with law enforcement, and we can have, I guess I forget the term they use, but stings, or, they typically have periods of the year where they put officers out there in high-vis vests, and they cross during times where traffic is heavy, and they issue citations for people that don't follow the rules, right? So that's kind of an educational piece. It's oftentimes they'll let people off with a warning, especially when the crosswalk is new and people are familiarizing themselves with the corridor and the way that the corridor is acting in its new configuration. But certainly there are some future things we can do to help educate people on the severity of not following the rules.
Okay, anybody else? Is there any public comment on ideas on this? Come on up. Would you push has to be green. Thank you so, and you
Yeah,
let go.
Corey Wilder, just a question. Did you consider a ped bridge at that location versus an at-grade crossing?
Yeah, so this has come up a number of times. I know, I don't think staff is unsupportive of a pedestrian bridge. I think they actually serve a great purpose. There are some challenges with this location. This is actually a truck route, and so by federal standards, I believe the lowest the deck could be on the pedestrian bridge is 14 feet 7 inches, which is very tall. And so when you're asking people with mobility issues to utilize this ped bridge, what I've seen, I grew up in Reno. The Audi Boulevard one just got taken down. RTC is doing a project there. My grandmother lived on Tom Sawyer Drive, just around the corner. So I get to see how this thing operated, day in and day out. I oftentimes would see people in wheelchairs going backwards, using their feet as like basically doorstops, because even though it met ADA compliance, it's still very difficult to get up there. And you're going up, almost 2 stories to get to the top. And so that's one side of the coin. On the other side of things, people that don't have mobility issues, they tend to not want to utilize them. So if they can get where they need to go and they want to get there, they're going to go, and they're typically going to ignore those. Now, where I do think a pedestrian bridge would work really well is during large events, right? You see a lot of people queuing up. You're going to have less traffic and less potential for accidents there. The other thing I'd like to mention is those are typically very expensive. When you're talking about bridges, they need deep foundations. They need a lot of support, a lot of concrete, a lot of steel. As you all know, we've talked about this time and time again, those prices right now are exorbitant. And so, you're looking in the 7-figure range easily to do something like this. With that being said, could this project accommodate a future bridge? Absolutely. We could do a planning in the future if that's something this community really wanted. We could tackle that if the funding was there and that was the wish of the people and of the board and this commission. But at this time, we're not moving forward with recommending a pedestrian bridge.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much. Do I have any? I don't see any more public comment, and it's not an action item, so just, oh, you had more slides? I'm sorry. I thought you were done with the crosswalk was the last pick. Oh, next steps. Okay, we knew this. Sorry.
Yeah, so just going over what's coming from this point on. We're working towards 100% design or final design. So we've got the 90 and then 100% stages coming up. We anticipate that taking us into kind of the middle of final or the later part of summer. And then after that, there's several steps between the bid award and time that construction starts. And so, sorry. So we still see construction beginning likely in early 2024. So we have some coordination with FHWA and NDOT as far as getting the agreements together once the final design package is finished, and then another step with them once bids are received and we have a recommendation to the contractor to do the project. So a few other things besides design that will be happening is the completion of the environmental review. So we have the development of the NEPA document. Right now we've sent in the draft document to NDOT for review and receive comments. And so the project team is working on finalizing that document to go back over to NDOT. We've got quite a few small easements and a few little bit larger easements to obtain from properties along the corridor. So that effort's kind of ramping up at this point and will continue through the next few months. We also have the grant agreement with FHWA, and we've been working with them over the past several months and kind of come to the same page as far as the content for the agreement. And at this point, we're just waiting to get to final design before we finalize the content that's in there. And then, of course, coordination with property owners and businesses. We've stepped that up over the last month, and we'll continue that with conversations on how the improvements impact them, and as well as access to their businesses. We've got the future meetings with the RAC, RTC, and Board of Supervisors for the 90% stage, and then a community meeting once we have a contractor on board to discuss the construction impacts. And communication tools have stayed the same through design. CarsonProud.com is still where we're posting the information for the project. So every so often we'll provide an update there. We have the text service that's listed here with a number. If you text that number, you'll be added to it. It was brought to our attention that the last update, the text didn't go out, so we fixed that. So any addition or any future updates, you will get a text if you're on that list. And then anybody's welcome to reach out to myself by email or phone. So that ends the presentation, and we're happy to get any additional questions or comments you have.
I got one comment. I mentioned to Randy earlier, your coordination with the property owners and the businesses, that also includes the developments that are under design in the corridor. So what we're coming up with now will work with all of that as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's a difficult thing to predict, kind of what we want, scenario, because developers and developments change all the time. But we have reached out to those particular property owners. One of them is the Altair Apartments, which is on the corner of Plaza and William. That one has a number of buildings or suites that exit onto the frontage of William Street. There are some particularly interesting grade challenges that come with that because of the ADA requirements and whatnot. So there are some patios and doorways that enter off of that frontage. And so we've been working directly with the design team from that developer to make sure that what we're producing or what we're proposing matches up with what they're wanting to do. So that's one thing. And then, yes, you'll notice on the north side of Mills Park there, we have those 3 developable parcels. We have pushed the sidewalk back away from the curb and gutter. So when it's ready or it's time to facilitate a driveway apron, it's a little bit easier to do. We don't have to tear up a bunch of brand new concrete in order to facilitate those. And also we have reached out to the owners and the developers on those projects. We're looking to see if we can identify specific lateral locations so we can plan for those for water and sewer and other dry utilities, as well as if we can tie down a driveway apron at this stage. That would be preferred because typically an apron requires a 2-foot road cut into the roadway. And so this is an area we're looking to reconstruct with this project. So ideally, if we can get that information sooner than later, we can hopefully provide that apron with the project and, avoid any kind of future road cuts when that development comes to fruition.
Is that at our expense, those aprons? So it's beneficial to them to take that on right now?
It is, yeah.
Right.
So the project would take care of those expenses.
Right.
However, there are areas in the development agreements or the SUPs or, whatever comes forward with these projects where we can maybe look at some pro rata shares or trying to bring some of that money back into the city for us providing those services. So all hope is not lost yet.
Yet, yeah. I'm like, you built it, I'm happy to have it, right? Okay. Anybody else? Did you have anything? Nothing? Go ahead, Mr. Dodson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we've talked quite a bit about the State Street left turn prohibition. There's a couple of other new ones, it looks like to me. Northbound Plaza Street and the left turn coming out of Rand Street there, southbound. I think I definitely see the reasons for those, but probably not going to get any pushback for doing those that you wouldn't anticipate.
So we've had a number of conversations with the businesses that would be affected by that. We have made some modifications to the one that's proposed at Rand. So we were challenged to go back and look at that, verified. So that was recommended in the traffic report. I think that was a question at some point. So we did make sure that was the recommendation there, primarily to stop people from interacting with the queue pockets that are set up for the southbound turn lane going eastbound on William. So that one we have modified to make sure we can still have left turns in, which the original design did not allow for that. So that was, sorry. Oh, at Plaza, okay. Didn't we also do that at Rand as well? So they can turn left into Rand? Yeah. We'll pull up a picture. And so if I'm mistaken, I'll correct myself. But my recollection from dealing with the property owner on this one and their management team was we did not allow, oh, thank you, yes, Rand. So that one, we're going to have double yellow lines there, and we're going to have a median there to restrict turns across. And that's generally because of the proximity to Solomon right there. And then we've also worked with the business owners further west on Plaza. And there's a potential we might actually remove that. We're still kind of dealing with the lane configuration now and how that works out. Right now, we're showing a median there. We're working on potentially allowing, essentially left turns into Plaza, so westbound to southbound, but then restricting left turn movements northbound to westbound. So in other words, we'd have a sweeping, a curve going to the eastbound lanes, but still potentially allowing for southbound turns onto that street. And that was generally a comment because a number of the businesses there take larger vehicles, delivery trucks for their parts and for their shipping. And so that concern was brought up to us from the business owners. So we're doing our best to try to accommodate kind of a modified approach there.
It looks like there's some new development being under construction right now there on off of Plaza Street. The other one that I wondered about was on Smith's heading eastbound. There's a turn lane in there now. Looks like that would be eliminated. And I just wondered if that the volume that goes in there, if that's going to be potentially an issue.
I'll leave it up to the design team to see if they can tackle that one. Angie, do you have any thoughts there, or Sean?
So if this is the location where there's a turn lane right now into Smith's, right? Yeah, that we're getting rid of. We don't think it will be a problem. I don't know. I don't think that specific movement was addressed in the traffic report. But we don't think it will be a problem to eliminate that.
So yeah,
You don't?
Just a quick follow-up. So yeah, so we're limiting essentially what you're asking, Commissioner Dodson, is the southbound movement. If you're heading eastbound, trying to get into the Smith's parking lot, there was a right-hand turn pocket for that specific movement. My recollection with talking with the original traffic team that when they were looking at volumes there, they were pretty low and it wasn't being utilized as much as a pocket would be, typically needed for. And so our design team thought when we talked about this, a year ago, was that This was probably a requirement of the development when this first went in, probably anticipating higher traffic volumes. This was probably anticipated prior to the freeway construction, right? So they were anticipating a growth in traffic along this corridor, and so that maybe this turn pocket would be needed. I think realistically and from a common sense approach, it's probably not as utilized as maybe you would think. And so now we're looking at converting that over into a bus pocket for a turnout. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of changes for movement, and I think you better be prepared for the phone calls. It's not going to be well received. Doesn't mean we're not doing the right thing for safety, but I am here to tell you we are making a lot of changes on a road that is our major, if not our highest volume, well, isn't it our highest volume local road? Next to what coming in at the hospital? Isn't this whole area really a heavily trafficked?
It definitely
use?
has higher traffic volumes, right? I believe it was in the 16,000
Yeah.
Average daily traffic range. So it is heavily used, and that, one of the comments that came up and one of the challenges that we have with this particular road is that it wants to function as a street and a road, right? And it's hard to really divert away from either one of those things because of how many points of ingress and egress we have, right? Typically on a street, you would have narrower corridors, you'd have more walkability, and you'd have more of these entrances into businesses, right? And in a road, you're operating more like you're trying to get from point to A to B.
Right.
This one tends to function as both. It kind of transverses between, one to the other. And it's difficult to get away from that just because of the location of where it's at in town. We've had a lot of complaints or talks about, why don't you just make this like Carson Street? It doesn't function like Carson Street, right? It's also a designated truck route for a big portion of it going into the freeway. And so there are a number of compromises that we have to live with in order to make this project function. Not all of them are ideal. We understand that. We get that. There's going to be a learning curve when people, see and understand how this corridor functions. But again, we do believe that, to your point, Mayor, that we're doing the right things. The engineering supports the changes we're making for this corridor. Is there going to be a learning curve? Absolutely. With every change, there is a learning curve with what's going on here. But we believe the long-term, vision and future of this road, it will function better. We'll have better traffic flow. The signals will be better coordinated. We'll have better multimodal access for people that want to use a corridor, not just vehicular access. And so over time, I think people will learn to love and experience this corridor in a different way. Can it be completely a street? Probably not, right? But to fit within our policies, to fit within what's existing out there, to make sure that businesses can function, we're not driving business out of the corridor, we do have to compromise in a number of different areas.
So what do you see as the travel time change? So, right, I'm coming in from Dayton and I want to go. What do you see? I can feel this already, that everything we're trying to solve, we're going to create some other problems, which is going to be backup of traffic. So what are you seeing in the change? Like 2 more minutes to go from Gold Dust to Main Street?
Yeah, so if you recall from the level of service, right, level of service is really an indicator of how long it takes to get through intersections in certain areas of town. The level of service is actually pretty poor right now, and in many of those areas, we're actually improving them. And I know that may seem counterintuitive when we're talking about removing lanes, when we're talking about narrowing roads and changing perception of the way people utilize this corridor. But when we start talking about signal improvements, when we start talking about narrowing of pedestrian crossings, right, reducing the time it takes for people to get across cross traffic, right, which also triggers the light to stay red longer for the people that are going, opposite of that movement. And so, what you may see is people slowing down, yes, but what we're hoping to achieve by doing a lot of these improvements is a better flow of traffic, right? So one of the things that happens when you have vehicles coming in from cross traffic into flowing traffic is you get bottlenecks, right? Somebody cuts out in front of you, people slam on the brakes, people see the brakes in front of them, they start slowing down. They may not even need to, but they have that knee-jerk reaction of, I need to adjust to the traffic conditions. We're hoping to move away from it. So by restricting some of these turn movements, we're getting at less and less of those bottlenecks, and traffic flow should be smoother and better with less abrupt changes or, division into the corridor.
But I guess my overall concern is when you're removing the left-hand turns, where is that traffic going? So I don't want to be naive and to say, okay, I can no longer come out of State Street and get on, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to push traffic into a residential zone. And I want to be clear that we know that's what we're doing, right? So while I'm trying to solve for that, am I creating another problem that's even more dangerous because the kids play out in the street? I just want to make sure that I'm not causing an unintended consequence, which is now I'm going to have a truck delivery, which happens often. There's a pizza place, the FedEx is there, the Starbucks. Am I going to create a whole bunch of truck traffic now somewhere that we never had it before? And is that worth the trade? I guess that's right. You're looking at all safety concerns,
Yeah.
right? So is moving truck traffic and all of that onto that residential State Street the right idea?
Yeah.
And
So-
is that trade good?
A couple of concepts I'll just bring up. It's not a concept lost on us. We realize that there are some trade-offs, right? I talked
Right.
about that previously. There are some trade-offs that we have to live with. The corridor that you're mentioning, so going north on State and then turning and coming back into Solomon, it is a relatively short, bypass, a detour to get there. We do have a number of businesses that were just approved through there. So I don't know if you recall from about a year ago, Planning Commission approved a 3-story U-Haul
Yep.
facility back there. So you're going to get a lot more traffic just,
Yes, I remember
regardless of the
that.
left turn in and out, you're
Right.
going to have a lot more people coming in for that storage. While it does have a mixed use zoning through there, we do have, commercial, industrial. We also have residential. It's not purely in residential. So I want to shy away from the fact that we're pushing traffic into residential. While yes, it does border residential, it is still a collector road and it's still intended to move traffic along from those points of interest. So, yes, are we expecting to have a few more trucks in that area? Sure. Is it going to be, a train of 67-foot long trucks going through there constantly? I don't believe it will be. Typically, when you look at large truck traffic, when you look at volume comparisons, by the nature of the vehicle, truck traffic is in the range of like 2 to 5% of total traffic through the corridor, right? It's not a huge, composition of the road traffic that's out there. So, will we see more? Yes, it's likely. Is it going to be detrimental to an extreme version of that? I don't believe so. And again, one of the benefits of having these just be medians, if we were to find something out in 10 years that, man, this is just crazy, we're having truck after truck after truck, we have the ability to make those adjustments, right? So whatever direction we choose, whether we choose to delay the left in, left out only until a future date, or if we install it now, we can always remove those in the future. And oftentimes, this project's a good example. Corridors can't function indefinitely for 100 years. People change, vehicles change, modes of transportation change, how people use those modes of transportation change. And so we have to be able to adjust as a city, right? We have to account for the now. We try to account for the future. But again, we're predicting, to the best of our ability, using an engineering judgment, using sound assumptions. Are those assumptions always correct? No, they're not always correct, right? But we have to do something. We have to start somewhere and use that sound engineering judgment, common practice. And in the future, I won't be here in 50 years, but the next, group of engineers that
blame
are
it
up
on
here
you.
will have to make decisions for the community at that point as well. So.
Right, okay. Anybody else? Ms. Maloney?
I just wanted to make one more comment, unrelated to State Street. I know there's interest, I've heard there's interest out in Lyon County for some future regional transit connectivity and just more broadly, studies have been done that show that business activity goes up when there's transit and there's pedestrians around. And I was really excited and grateful to see all the bus turnouts. Those are fantastic, speaking to your point about smoothing traffic. So I thought those were really nice and wanted to thank you for those.
Thank you.
And I'll just ask if, just because we had more, sorry, realize you had more slides. Is there any other public comment? I don't want to leave anybody out. Nope, okay. Thank you. Did you get enough to have your head spin?
Yeah, and thank you for challenging us. I know sometimes the answers are difficult and the conversations can be difficult, but that actually pushes us to try to do a better job. So we really do appreciate all the input you've provided, and we're happy to
I
hear
think the
it.
public needs to understand, oftentimes we always hear it's just rubber stamped. It simply isn't true, right? And again, it's what is the right balance? And I particularly like the comment that if we don't have it right, we can fix it. And so also at State Street, that fix is not, it's not a horrendous fix, right? And that's what I think is also important that we impart to the public. If we, not that having to do $20,000 one way or the other doesn't sound like a lot of money, but in road work, it really isn't if you have to make an accommodation, because we don't know how the new storage facility is going to work. And I could be completely wrong, but I am just betting on phone calls from the residential part about not being able to come out and make a left and forcing everyone by there. Because the residential is all at the other side, Long Street, and there is a lot there. And so I want to make sure I'm good to everyone. And so we may have to rethink, but I like putting that on the record, that there's opportunities. We don't have to be tied to this if we didn't get it quite right. So thank you guys so very much for your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are not going to hear item 5B tonight. I am tabling that to a future meeting. It needs a little bit more discussion on that one. It's not quite ready to come to the commission yet. So I am going to move on to agenda item 5C and 5D. I'm going to open them both up for discussion and comment, and then we will take separate motions. But I'll open both items up on that one. So, Brian, are you going to start us off? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Byrne, Transportation Engineer. As earlier Kelly mentioned in the CAMPO meeting, the TAP program. So the item 5C, this one is proposing infrastructure project that aims to finalize the multi-use path that runs alongside I-580 from MoDOC to Highway 50. During the initial design and construction of the multi-use path just to the south of that, this portion was presented as a bid alternative. Due to the limited funds, this portion wasn't constructed. So in addition to applying for this TAP program, the development of Lampa Ranch East, the apartments SUP, came into the findings of having a pro rata share to contribute for this multi-use path. That is to contribute up to $30,000 for the development. So in any future developments to the adjacent properties, that would also be open for a pro rata share for this project. So staff believe this is a suitable project as it provides kind of the readiness for the TAP program, given that it was already kind of portion of this was already designed. Before I hand it off to Scott, do you have any questions?
Ms. Maloney?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I asked a question of Chris offline before this item, and I think it's important just to get it on the record because of our unfunded maintenance liability and creation of new infrastructure. Can you just really quick, because he had a great answer for me, and I don't know if it's you or Chris. What is the rationale for building an additional parallel facility instead of putting the pedestrian facility along North Lampa?
Yeah, I can jump in on this. So the initial study of the improvements on North Lampa couldn't accommodate the bike lanes and the pedestrian infrastructure. So it kind of comes to a bottleneck as it approaches Highway 50. So I believe that's the reason why of extending this multi-use path off to the side to make that connection.
And you would have to require right-of-way along North Lampa to accommodate that pedestrian facility, is that right?
That's correct, yes. Sorry,
Okay.
Brian, yes.
Yeah.
The right-of-way for this project is already acquired and ready to go.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful to hear, and I just think it's important for people to hear.
Okay.
Brian, the North Lampa extension to the south from our figure here, that'll be going in when the development goes in?
Correct.
All right, so we'll have an additional street in that area as well, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott Bohemier for the record. The Western Nevada Safe Routes to School would also like to apply for one of the TAP grants through NDOT. The application that we will put in will request a 4-year agreement to fund the program's personnel costs, contract services, school safety programs, training, along with general supplies and equipment. Attached on packet page 129 is the proposed budget broken down year by year for the 4 years. The total of this application will be $1,312,321.50, and it is intended, as we do now, that a 5% match will come through in-kind match. Securing this grant will ensure staff can continue to provide the important program to the students of Carson City, Douglas County, Lyon County, and Story County. Thank you for your time, and I can answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on this one? Is there any public comment on item 5C or 5D? Seeing none, let's take our motion first on 5C. Mr. Dotson?
I move to approve the submission of the grant application as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. May I have a motion on 5D, please? Ms. Maloney?
I move to approve submission of the grant application as presented.
Second by Mr. Novak. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are now on agenda item 5E, discussion and possible action regarding a resolution authorizing the submission of an FTA Section 5310 grant. We're on grants today for CAMPO for $477,499, subject to the 20% local match, estimated to be $95,500 to fund capitalized operating expenses for Jack Assist Paratransit. And Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Byrne, Transportation Engineer. CAMPO has released a call for projects for the FTA 5310 funds. This FTA grant provides funding to enhance the mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. So RTC and Jack plan to submit a 5310 fund for Jack Assist program. Looking for the approval to submit this grant.
Which has to be done by resolution, just so everyone knows this is requires that. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Dotson?
Brian, I noticed this is for capitalized operating expenses. And I'm not sure that I'm clear on what capitalized operating expenses are. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do because the normal operating expense match is 50%. So let's capitalize all the operating expenses. Probably not possible, huh?
Yeah.
I'll take that question, Commissioner Dotson. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager.
Nice try. Oh, sorry.
It would be great if we could capitalize all of our operating expenses. The use of capitalized operating is only available to certain sized, small, intense urban transit agencies, of which CAMPO and Jack are one of them. And so we're able to capitalize our operating under the Section 5310 funding because of our size and because of the way we operate. We can't capitalize operate Section 5307 funding, which is our primary source of funding for Jump Around Carson, as it's not eligible under that particular federal law or regulation. So we're able to do that given our agency size, and we take advantage of the 80% match as opposed to a 50% match for operating.
And we try. Anybody else? I don't see any other questions. Is there any public comment? No? Okay. So this one on the motion needs to include the resolution number 2023 RTC-R-1. Ms. Maloney?
I move to approve resolution 2023-RTC-R-1 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the resolution. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are now on agenda item 5F, which is discussion and possible action regarding the submission of a letter of intent for a traffic safety grant application to the Public Safety Office of Traffic Safety for $200,000, subject to a 25% local match totaling $50,000 from the Carson City School Crosswalk Striping and Education Project. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
Yes, thank you. My nephew, Chris Martinovich, is the city staff presenter on this item. My disclosure and analysis, oh, I didn't read 5.
That's okay, you're all right, keep going.
All
You're
right.
gonna say it anyway on the end.
Will apply here as well. Chris and I are not receiving compensation of any kind directly related to this item. It will not foreseeably impair or enhance the terms of his city service, and we are not affected by the outcome of this item to a greater degree than any other Carson City resident. I have no disqualifying conflict, and I'll be voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 5F is to, as mentioned, to submit a grant application to the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety for a project to do some crosswalk striping and crosswalk education campaign in and around our school zone areas. Typically, Carson City Public Works maintenance staff do a lot of the crossing striping, repainting around our schools. This project would allow for additional crosswalks to be striped around our schools. In addition, we plan to do some educational outreach in partnership with the schools, in partnership with the Safe Routes to School program, to provide educational updates about how you should cross, where you should cross, and items like that. This grant is one that comes around frequently, and so we're taking a stab at this and seeing if we can take advantage of potential funding for something we're already doing and expand our striping program to a little bit larger area of the city. That's the background here. Happy to answer questions.
So are you indicating it's the first time we're applying for
Yeah,
traffic safety?
I don't remember in my memory of us applying for this particular grant in the past.
Right, let's go for it. Anybody else?
And then, Chris, this one goes to DPS,
Correct.
with
This
the
is,
Office of Traffic Safety,
Safety.
so NDOT does not have a role in this one.
that's correct.
Okay, let's clarify that.
Ms. Schutte?
I just have a question. On this one, talking about the informational mailers on page 2 will be regarding crosswalk safety and driver behavior. So that's one of the ways the money is being spent. In light of the previous application or grant, can this money, is there perhaps a more impactful way to spend this money other than informational mailers? I'm just wondering how impactful that will be unless they're designed with kids in mind as an interactive mailer or something, pictures or drawings or something that would really catch their attention to where they're paying attention. So that was just a question.
I think those are great points. I think there's a variety of things we've been considering in terms of what that information looks like. We want to develop a package that definitely grabs your attention. Top of the line things, utility billing inserts, one thing we're considering. We're considering outreach to individual schools. But I think your points exactly are something we need to consider in terms of grabbing people's attention, making it more than just a piece of paper with some words on it, right? And so I appreciate that, and we'll definitely take that into consideration as part of that campaign, whatever that happens to be.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Maloney?
In the staff report, the fiscal impact explains that the local match will come from the long line striping account, Chris. Long line, the difference between long line and short line is that long line is those long lines in the middle of the roads, and crosswalks are considered short lines. Just for using these funds in the long line account, can you confirm that you staff believe there's enough funding in the long line account remaining after using this for crosswalks that will still be able to complete all the necessary long line activities?
Yes, I did consult with the street operations manager in terms of the use of this funding for this particular purpose. Both long line striping and short line striping come out of the long line account, and there is sufficient funding in that account for not only our long line and short line programs, but this additional short line concept.
That's great to hear on the record. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Is there any public comment on this item? No? Okay, I'll accept a motion. Go, Lisa.
I move to approve the submission of a letter of intent and grant application as presented.
I will second.
Second by Mr. Novak. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5G. Discussion of possible action regarding the submission of a request to Carson City's congressional delegation seeking $2.6 million in federal community project funding for federal fiscal year 24 for the Curry Street Complete Street. I'm loving this. Streets with Complete Streets, but anyway, improvement project with an estimated $1.3 million in local funds contributed to cover the project's preliminary estimated cost of $3.9 million. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose conflicts of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My nephew, Chris Martinovich, is the city staff presenter on this item. My disclosure and analysis from 5F apply here as well. Chris and I are not receiving compensation of any kind directly related to this item. It will not foreseeably impair or enhance the terms of the city service, and we are not affected by the outcome of this item to a greater degree than any other Carson City resident. Therefore, I have no disqualifying conflict, and I'll be voting.
Thank you so much. Mr. Martinovich, you want to talk about this one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is to request funding from the House and Senate Appropriations Committee, collectively known as Congressionally Designated Spending, or commonly referred to as earmarks. This project would be for the Curry Street Improvement Project, which was discussed in part at previous board meetings. Most notably, it was discussed last year at our District 4 Curry Street Slurry Project Award, where I believe it was Commissioner McQuarrie at the time asked, well, why are we doing this middle part? Well, the reason at that time, and the reason holds true in that this middle part of Curry Street needs additional design, additional thought, additional rehabilitation beyond just the pavement preservation we did at that time. So what we're doing here is seeking a federal funding source for the construction of this project that will look at not only pavement reconstruction, but other multimodal connections that are lacking in that area, as well as needed storm drain and roadside safety improvements that occur along that portion of Curry Street. I'm sure we've all driven it a number of times. So this project this funding would help address that project and move that forward. It is identified in the Regional Transportation Plan, and Carson City has requested that CAMPO include it into its tip for a potential project. So I'm happy to answer questions on this Curry Street project.
Does any member have a question? So to be clear, we're going to ask for a congressional appropriation of $2.6 million is the request.
That is
that's going
correct.
in? And is this the best project based on that spreadsheet that we saw you pull out earlier? Is this the best thing, considering all of our needs, that we should be asking Congress to give us a direct appropriation?
When we consider all of the different factors that go into the congressional appropriations and the factors that they consider in their applications and their requests, we believe this is the project that best meets the needs that we have ready to move forward in the timeframe that it needs to move forward to use that funding.
Because I think it's imperative to understand why this project versus some of the others, when you look at all of I know the whole audience and everyone listening to us reads them all too, but when you look at our TAPs and our TIPs and our 2050 RT plan, and you look at this, why is this the project? And so I really wanted it on the record is because we think this project is ready to go.
There are
Right? That's a big factor, that it's part of a larger pieces, other things we're looking at, and this is a section that we can do versus some of the other projects that were in the 2050 RTP. why this one, and just to make sure that we all concur, this is a good project to go after. I will disclose there's other projects that the city is submitting for direct funding, but this would be the road project that we would submit. Just so that you know, it's not the only thing we're submitting. Mr. Dotson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could you talk a little bit about the percent of the local match on this one? I know that you have rationale for having a local match that is higher than the absolute limit there.
The amount that we're requesting from the congressionally designated spending versus the amount of local match that we're providing in the project was really a kind of a balance of what can we do from a transportation perspective, what can we get for other utility improvements, and we look to see, you know, what are other types of projects requesting in terms of congressionally designated spending, and not asking for too much or too little, finding that balance versus the scope and the need of the particular project. We sort of landed on 2.6 million. If we want to ask for more, I guess I'd take that input from the board, but 2.6 million as the federal request is what we've asked for. It's likely a 95.5. Our other congressionally designated spending is at a 95.5 match typically.
What do you mean by that?
So the federal
The other
funding we
ones
get,
we got weren't that way.
the federal funding we get through the congressionally designated spending through the Federal Highway Aid Program comes at a 95 federal, 5% local match.
Oh, but not from direct funding this way.
Not,
Mind. Two
yeah.
different things. Okay.
This will come through the Federal Aid Highway Program.
Chris, could I ask one more question, please? So does that mean that the chances of getting the grant approved are enhanced with a greater local match?
I think it means we have a much greater chance of getting the funding, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Maloney?
My only comment on this one, I don't know when this is due, but I understand that the last time those huge floods came, that there were some pretty incredible photos. And if it happens to rain later this week, photos and include them in the application.
Will do.
Because I think those are pretty impactful if you can wait a couple of days.
Okay,
It's due at,
the end of the month, I believe.
let's see, Congressman Amade's is Friday.
Is it Friday?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's Friday is the deadline. Hence your revised agenda to hurry up and get something approved that we could submit. But I will be going to Washington DC, so I'm not afraid to lobby people with extra information if that were to occur.
Sure, we can take
Load,
pictures.
load me up, right? It's always anything I can speak to on our behalf. I would be happy to do that because we will have Hill Day, so be happy to accommodate that. Else have anything? No reason not to submit this. I mean, it's an application. It's another one, another opportunity to find some help to get projects done. Is there any public comment on this item? No? Okay, I'll accept a motion.
I'll do that. I move to approve the community project funding request as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Ms. Maloney. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We're now on to agenda item 6A, our transportation manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few items I wanted to cover. First of all, I want to do a shout out to Carson City Public Works street maintenance crews for not only their tireless efforts on snow removal, 12-hour shifts for multiple days on end, but as well as the upcoming storms that we're anticipating. They're already out there doing their part to make sure we get the water to where it needs to go. So shout out to them. I do want to also just remember to advise the public, you know, if water does pool on the roads, to slow down. Hydroplaning is definitely a concern, so please slow down and be wary and know that we're working on getting those drains cleared to make sure the water goes to where it needs to go. I'll make everyone also aware that this weekend is the time change. So I want to remind everybody that it's going to be darker in the morning. So around schools and our school zone areas, please be aware of people walking. It was lighter, and now it's going to be darker again in the morning. So wanted to make that note. I got a question last month on our street operations report, and we don't have a street operations report this month as they've been plowing continuously. It was a question regarding the amount of brine that we used. So I did talk to our street crews. They use essentially, the brine is applied to all major arterials and a few collectors. So the major roads, Carson Street, William Street, College Parkway, Fairview, Stewart, typically receive the brine. Per storm, it's around 3,500 to 4,000 gallons per storm of brine solution that's applied. And it's 23% salt and 67% or 76% water is the mix. So just as background information to how that works. We had an item last month regarding approval of a contract for Ecolane for software services for Jump Around Carson. That had a pending motion, pending FTA approval. The FTA did not approve of us executing the grant. We have worked with Ecolane, and we're working on a short-term agreement with Ecolane so to allow us time to procure new software using FTA procurement processes. So we're going to buy us a few months, and then this summer and fall we'll work on procuring a new software for that. So just wanted to provide an update on that. We weren't able to move forward. There's a number of safe routes to school events, so I'll end on this happy note. We have a number of safe routes to school events that Scott's been coordinating. March has all kinds of activities. I believe the mayor is participating in few, but I wanted to note that the Ride for Reading is occurring on March 21st at Bordewick Bray Elementary. Approximately 500 students will be there. I believe the mayor is going to be there. The governor's going to participate as well. And so we're really excited to have that event, and I appreciate Scott stepping up. We also are doing a number of events for Nevada Moves Week. This includes events not only in Carson City, at Eagle Valley and Fremont Elementary, but it also in Lyon County and Douglas County as well. So we're actively participating in those events. And we've had a number of safety assemblies. Scott and his team of champions has been going out and having a number of safety assemblies at individual schools. So he's been really out in the community and promoting safety and around our school. He told me to indicate that we've touched we've impacted and given information to over 3,300 students. So that's something I'm definitely proud of, and Scott should be too. So wanted to throw that out there. Happy to answer questions. That's what I have tonight.
We're good. We're on to 6B. Come on, Brian. Tell us how through the snow any of our projects are progressing.
Right.
Not being rude, just honest, right? Wow. People must be having a tough time getting anything
Yes.
done. Yeah.
All right, so for our project stats reports, we will start off with the Edmond Sports Complex. This project is currently out for bid, so we should be receiving that bid here shortly for review, and construction is anticipated to start this summer. Our Roop Street project, this project will be repackaged to be combined with the future design phase of Roop Street between Mustard Street and Washington. The project will be reported again once design resumes. Our Robinson area sewer replacement project, that project is still continuing with the contractor coordinating the punch list items. Given the weather, that will still continue. Colorado Street, the construction project commenced in February and began the installation of the water main. This is expected to be ongoing until early summer, bearing the weather delays. The 5th Street reconstruction project. The project has completed 60% designs for the roundabout and other portions of the project for staff to begin review. Staff are working on completing the noise study, and the final design is projected to be completed in July. We should be presenting and giving an update on this project here soon.
I'd be interested in what the hell the noise study says, but
So will I.
we have to do it? Okay, I wouldn't, but.
Yeah, we'll get the report soon. East William Street, I think we've got quite a good update on that tonight, but is continuing. The DMV multi-use path project, that project is in the process of developing 60% design plans, and is scheduled to submit these plans to NDOT in April, or next month, for review. Appian Way Signal Project. The city has received the 90% plans from the consultant, which are currently undergoing internal review. Additionally, the subsurface utility investigations have been conducted, and NV Energy is currently engaged in designing a new meter. We expect the design to be completed spring of this year. Our Desatoya ADA Improvements Project, we have completed the 100% design plans, and that has been scheduled to be released early March, so that's out for bid right now. Our Medical and Mountain Street District 5 projects, both those projects were out to bid, and we should be receiving those back here soon, and we'll be bringing those anticipated constructions for award. Our Winnie Lane reconstruction project, in late February, a project kickoff meeting was held with the consultant to initiate the survey, geotech investigation, and the design. The design process will continue until the fall of this year, with the construction anticipated in early 2024. And last is our West Carson Vulnerable User Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project. Staff is coordinating the survey data with the consultant, and we'll shortly begin the design after that. Are there any questions?
So
Thank you.
that one's a perfect example, right? You got federal directed spending of $1 million and then 250. So again, when we put, anyway, just shows you an example, right? They were good to us. They haven't given us any of the money yet, though. I know, on any of them. We got quite a few,
Well,
so.
yeah, I mean, this one, by the fact that we're able to move forward, we have an agreement executed with NDOT for that congressionally designated spending, we're going. It's
for
good.
us.
Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Okay, anybody had any other questions? Any public comment on any of the issues there? This is good news, good news. Okay, then we're on final public comment. Seeing none. Great job, everyone. We're adjourned. Meeting with a lot of grants.